Welcome to the Daily Apple. I'm your host, Kevin White. Emma Ryan and I will dive into all topics related to the science of longevity, along with some other subjects we just find of interest, with the hopes to provide useful information for everyone. This stems from my personal interest to optimize the human condition, to not just live longer, but to live better. Hey, hello everybody. I'm here today with the good Dr. Shimi Kang, all the way from Vancouver. And I really appreciate you taking time to talk to me today. I really do.
Thank you, Kevin. Excited to be on the show.
Yeah. I guess first I got to tell you how I came across you was whenever you spoke years and years ago at a conference I was at, and I came home and I just really appreciated your viewpoint and your analogy on how to manage tech. And I guess I should kind of back up a little bit. You're a psychiatrist and you specialize and have a lot of information on tech and everything. And I just think it's really timely, but how you kind of made that analogy into how we should look at that. And it's not all bad and all good. And there's a way to kind of manage that in a healthy way, because anyway, there's just things have changed so much in the way we live life over the past 15 years. But I actually took my son, I don't know if I told you this, but I took my son to a comedian and they make you turn in your phones.
Oh, nice.
And it was this huge stadium and it's in this bag that you can't undo. And we're sitting in there and I looked around and everybody's heads were up and it was like living in the 80s. It was so refreshing. People were talking to each other. My son had to talk to me. Anyway, but I'll let you elaborate a little bit. What do you think about everything, and how did you get started in this whole space? And
yeah, that's such a great story, and I think there's so much power in that, right? Like just seeing people looking and talking to each other. So thanks so much. I love all the work that you're doing, making the world a healthier place. So I'm an addiction psychiatrist. That's my fundamental training. And so I did psychiatry. I did the addiction fellowship back at Harvard Mass General at the time. And that was really interesting. We were researching alcohol dependence, the neuroscience underpinnings of addiction. It was just kind of happening. This is 28 years ago, right? Before we really understood the molecules of addiction. We kind of heard dopamine, but we didn't really know much about how it all worked. It was also when OxyContin was doing trials there, and I saw firsthand kind of the influence of external forces sometimes on all very well-meaning researchers. And so my journey really is along the lines of what I call holistic psychiatry, mental health. And first of all, the mind and body are not disconnected and never should have been. So maybe a holistic healer is a better way to say it. And way back in 1997, I interned at the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. And I was doing research on the World Atlas of Mental Health. And mental health and addiction was just the number one problem at the time. The WHO said stress is the number one health epidemic. We now know loneliness is the next major health epidemic. These are both connected to tech in our phones. But at that time, we were calling nicotine the gateway drug of addiction. And I would say the gateway to addiction, number one is sugar, the processed sugar in our foods, and number two, devices and technology. These are designed to be addictive, make no mistake about it. And so I really wrote my book with that background as an addiction specialist, but as a mother of three teenagers, as someone who grew up in the 70s, 80s, playing outside, just on my bike in the big blue sky, and really seeing how the world has changed, how childhood has changed, how humanity has changed. And tracking the trends that were going along with that. So I wanted to give a solution. The book is called The Tech Solution, not just the problem. And that's where I really launched into this idea of a tech dump.
And the fact that you name it The Tech Solution, so I was reading it and I was in the third chapter and gosh, it was so anxiety provoking on all the real data you talked about and how, the launch of the iPhones and how a lot of these things correlated around that time. And I looked at, the anxiety, the easy dopamine kicks, and all these things you elaborate in great detail. And I was so anxious at the end of it. I thought, I wish I'd have known about this like 10 years ago. My son
Mhm.
is 19. I've got a daughter who's 21. So, but the nice thing is after that came this whole part on solutions. So you do that a lot throughout the book to kind of, calm somebody's nerves like me who's reading it and thinking, oh crap, what's going on? What do we do? So,
Yeah. Well, the good news, and I have my brain here because it's
yeah.
my buddy. The brain is amazing. It's neuroplastic, right? Like, it's not set in stone. There's no chambers, like a heart where it has a mechanical understanding. It's all wiring and rewiring, and we can change habits at any time until the moment we die. We have neuroplasticity. My dad's 92. And I think I told the story how he reversed his Alzheimer's diagnosis over 8 year span because it was probably PTSD fundamentally, and on top of a whole bunch of diet changes and mental health changes. Your kids are 19 and 21. They're not even fully myelinated. So they have great opportunity to put in those habits for healthy tech, right? So it's really important, the message, especially for young people who are digital natives. We're digital immigrants, our generation, but our kids are what we call digital natives. They're wired from the crib. They've never known the world without tech. It is like air to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so really explaining that the tech diet is like a food diet. It's exactly the same. There's healthy choices here. We can use tech for podcasts like this, music playlists that help you focus if you're neurodiverse, in school or at work, apps that check your mindfulness, your journaling, your steps, your sleep, and positive connection, self-care, and creativity. So that's the positives of the tech diet. That's the healthy tech you want to consume. And then in the book, I guide people to limit and monitor the sugar of their tech diet. And that's, the mindless scrolling, the gaming, nothing wrong with those, but it's like eating a bag of chips, right? Not too much. It's a bit mindless. Dopamine is the molecule there. That's the ingredient of that diet. We want to limit and monitor the dopamine. And then there is the toxic tech, the stuff that is highly, even more addictive, the online shopping, the pornography, the hate, the bullying, the rage farming, all of those aspects from a content point of view, but also toxic tech just to our physical body, like the blue light coming into our eyes, we know now is connected to even diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, dysregulating melatonin, and very fundamental metabolic pathways, our necks and our backs, and sitting, being sedentary, right? Sitting is the new smoking. So we want to look at our time on tech as a consumption. We want to avoid the cortisol, that's the toxic stuff, limit and monitor the dopamine, the sugar, and then make the choices to consume the healthy stuff. And then we can navigate this world, which I call the fire of our time. The most important human innovation is tech since the time of fire. Let's get it right. Let's not burn down the house.
Yeah.
And now with AI, all of this is going to be supercharged. So this is so timely to be discussing this.
What do you think some things we should, well, let me back up. I thought that was really good, the fire of our time, because, like you talked about in the book and you've spoken about, the fire of our time it does a lot of wonderful things, makes food digestible, cooking, etc., but can certainly do a lot of harm as well if used the wrong way. But yeah, I mean, as we move forward, that's an interesting point with AI and everything. Like you said, it's becoming supercharged and it's not going away. It's going to just exponentially grow and be a real integral part of our lives. I mean, what are some things that you see that you deal with even in your clients, or that you recommend that you see over and over, or that you find is a problem? And what tricks or tips do you have to kind of deal with that? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously part of it is just being mindful of the issue and not being blinded by it, but
Mm-hmm.
being aware.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the first iteration of AI, which came to us, really was in the form of social media.
Mm-hmm.
And Facebook, the like button, the three little dots, text
Mm-hmm.
messaging, and all of it is about dopamine manipulation. And the industry called it the race to the bottom of the brainstem, right? So what they were referring to is whoever could get to that freeze, fight, or flight, capture that attention, hold it there, and it is going to make the most money, right? Because that's what it was about. It was an industry that wasn't using neuroscience to say, how can we get the best product for world health, mental health.
Yeah.
It was how can we grow faster? So now the industry is calling it the race to intimacy, and I think that's really important to understand what AI, the next iteration is. It is not going to be about addiction. It's going to be about loneliness. And we are already seeing, I don't want to get all like extreme, but the replacement of relationships through these algorithms. Some quick examples. Snapchat has a bot, and I say, my daughter's 14. It's a tough age. She could set Nellie, a bot, give it a name, and talk to Nellie all day long. And Nellie, the bot, will ask her how her volleyball game is. She'll talk about the music she likes, connect with her in her language and a voice. And that's so much easier than making a real friend. And that friend maybe themselves being on the phone or distracted or struggling through those social relationships. So that's one example of the replacement of intimacy. And we see it, just your example at the comedy show, right? We'd rather be dealing with whatever's on our phones than looking at each other if our phones are in our hands. Another really big example is, think of someone like Andrew Tate, right? And the influence on young men and boys, and the replacement of other male role models, by this one who, is kind of speaking at certain things that, 14 billion impressions, there's a reason. And on the same time, maybe, we can see that among all gender role models that are kind of coming into that intimate space. So it could be relationships, right? Japan is a plummeting birth rate because we're seeing this term called shut-ins. Where people are choosing to just stay in and hang out with their tech, including pornography and all their needs, right? DoorDash your food. So we really are at this place. I don't think it's sounding the alarm. We need to kind of sound it more, because we're really seeing that we're heading into loneliness already. And now we have this AI that actually wants us to, because it's an industry, a for-profit industry.
So you mentioned that recently about that. I wasn't aware of that. There's a disease and there's a name for it in, Japan, where guys won't leave their homes for months because they meet all their needs right there.
Yeah. Sorry, it's called hikikomoro, I believe,
Yeah.
and maybe they're wrong. And then I think the loose translations are shut in or left out. It could be either one. And I think that's really relevant here, because you see, there's gender differences too, across the genders and how tech is being consumed. And we know that young males, we've never seen anything replace intimacy or sexual drive.
Yeah.
In all of human history, but within 8 years of the iPhone coming out, we saw teenagers dating less, right? And we thought that was a good thing, but no, it wasn't, because the human drive to go see each other when you're a teenager shouldn't be overridden, right? It's a natural instinct.
How do you, you see that so much. Kids aren't really wanting to leave home as much. They're not wanting to get their driver's license and all these things. How do you see that affecting the brain and firing and all that? You make mention of that some in your book, but how do you see how do you see that changing, and then how do you correct that, and how do you convince somebody to even correct that if they're shit's like, hey, I've got my AI buddy here, Hank, who gives me all the love I need and all the attention I need, and then I've got, or vice versa, whatever your gender is. So how do you convince somebody that, hey, 7-8 hours on a video game isn't really doing you any justice, or living in home, being stuck on that? I mean, because I'm sure people come to you or are brought to you by loved ones.
Sure. Yeah, it's such a problem. To answer your first question, what do we know the impacts on the brain? Right now, we know tech is linked, okay, not causative, but linked to anxiety, depression. Addiction is now a medical diagnosis in Europe. Internet gaming disorder and addiction disorder and gaming disorder, ICD-10 diagnoses. We know that we're seeing deficits in attention, focus, of course, so ADD rates. Also, social skills going down, including the most fundamental social skill of empathy, because, we're not seeing reactions. We can be so mean online, and we definitely have seen a rise in cyberbullying up to 800% post-COVID. And then the blue light impact, and the list goes on, right? In terms of the impacts, there's a term called virtual autism, which is about behaviors that look similar to autism, but when you remove the screens, you see a reversal because thankfully the brain is neuroplastic. So, there's opportunity here regardless of what you're seeing in yourself or a loved one. Now, how do we manage that? So my first book was called The Dolphin Way. And so I go, really, it's grounded in the science of motivation, getting back to my addiction research and background. So The Dolphin Way was a parenting book, but it was really my approach as a psychiatrist. And then I turned it into as a parent, where there's three interpersonal styles. So, if it's a loved one or a patient, let's say, or a client, you can either be a jellyfish, like on your phone 8 hours a day, like, I don't know what to do about it. Like, I said you should stop. The person isn't listening. So we don't want to do that, although it is tempting, right? When you're kind of like tired. And I say when you're in flight mode, we're more likely to be permissive in our relationships. We don't want to be the opposite of that. We don't want to be the shark or the tiger and say, well, it's time to put your phone away. Like, just delete the app. Like, prescriptive, like, take the pill. If that's all people need, all we need is to say, stop smoking, lose weight, cut sugar. We would have a very healthy society, but we don't, right? Obesity and all these things are on the rise. So we need a style that will break into those addictions and those behaviors. And that style has been proven to be this balance of firm and flexible or authoritative. And I call it the dolphin style. So the body of the animal is firm but flexible. I think I have a dolphin right there. The way we manage it is, if it's a client, patient, or loved one, you're firm in your role. Like, what role am I? As a doctor, I'll be like, look, I am here for your health, right? So, and you build that relationship with all that. And you know what? You might not like this, but, I am firm that we have to talk about the phone today. Come on. Like, we got to talk about tech. And you can be playful like the dolphin, lighten the mood, laugh at yourself, say, I'm addicted too. Everyone is, have that issue and clearly, but then flexible to see where they land. Because people are going to be in either pre-contemplation, like, what are you talking about? There's no way my phone is impacting my diabetes or my sleep or my relationship. So pre-contemplation, contemplation, maybe she's right. Or, I think there's a little nugget there that I get. Action, they're ready. And then they might maintain that, your directive, your guidance, and then relapse, right? Those are the stages of change. And that interpersonal style with specific tools, which I go into a lot of detail in The Dolphin Way. Curiosity, think of the dolphin, building community, all of that is part of that metaphor.
How do you, I guess somebody kind of needs to change if they want to, even an adult, if they're just spending, scrolling mindlessly, they kind of have to see that, hey, this is a problem for me. So I guess you're not going to convince somebody to kind of alter that unless they have the need to do it themselves. But
yeah. I used to, sort of, though, right? Like, I feel as a clinician and even as a parent, what used to really bug me is when I worked in mental health and psychiatry, and I still am there, and you'll see on the chart, patient not motivated. Right. And to me, it felt like such a cop out. Like, our job as healers is to help be part of that. So You're right. We can't force someone, right? That adage, you can't make a horse drink, but you can lead them to water. Right. So there are science-based tools that help enhance motivation, move people from contemplation to action, pre-contemplation. They're unmotivated. So I like one of my tagline, I love is, there's no such thing as an unmotivated person. We are meant to be motivated. But there's a lot of distractions in the way, a lot of dopamine that's constantly yanking us towards pleasure, that up and down hit of sugar. But relationship and who you are really makes a big difference.
Yeah.
But you're right, it takes time. Yeah. And sometimes never, I'm not minimizing. I've worked with people for years who it's been really hard to move them along. But we're seeing breakthroughs, right? I just finished the world's first study on psilocybin and addiction.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see what happens with this new frontier. Maybe that's another topic one day.
Yeah, the whole rewiring, you talk about that some in your book about nerves that wire together, fire together, and all that, and building new pathways and everything after, out of repetition. And that's really exciting about the psilocybin in regards to that. So yeah, definitely, that's a whole other topic that I'd love to delve into sometime.
Yeah, we need to be really careful. Not endorsing, but it's a
Yeah,
complex.
yeah.
But tech is, I feel it's the issue of our time. And I would love for health practitioners, anyone in this space, we need to start screening for it. We need to start asking about it, really see it as that gateway, just like sugar, right?
Hmm.
And understand that uh, it's part of our addictions too. Like, there's no way any human can self regulate, let alone kids or people under 25, let's say, head injury, ADHD, concussions. Like, there's this whole realm that are more vulnerable to.
Hmm. Hmm. I even find myself, and I'm sure you've done this too, or it's pretty common that you'll get on there and you mean to do something, like whether it's I need to message this person or whatever, and you find yourself down this rabbit hole of this Instagram nonsense for like, and 15 minutes has completely gone by, or 20 or more, I won't say, but and it's like, where's that time gone, and what was I doing in the first place? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where all the
Mm-hmm.
programming and everything, the reason they make it that way, that's what they want. I'm the product,
Yeah.
not the consumer. So
Yeah. And so common sense, like, you asked, what do we do? I think in chapter 2, I have like the 8 ways, or, things like the red button, right? Like, understand all these things. But I think it's really about, all the usuals, right, Kevin? Like, self care first. So you're more likely to grab that sugar when you're sleep deprived, stressed, So same, you're more likely to grab that phone and self soothe when you're sleep deprived, stressed.
mhm,
So, care for self, routine, regular sleep, positive, real life social connection, exercise, get outside in nature. Our eyes need to see, the light, all of the antidepressant benefits. And use, your screen time to shut off your notifications, self regulate, monitor yourself first, right? And you'll see your own challenges. And as a psychiatrist, we were taught to be a blank slate, and that never felt right for me. I
mhm.
talk a lot to my patients about my own struggles. And this is one
Yeah.
that I think is a really nice opportunity to disclose, because we are all literally in the same boat with our phones.
Yeah, yeah, that's a lot of the ways I interact with my own clients, is just being honest about yourself too. It's more of a, we're working through this together, and uh,
Mhm.
yeah, that's good
Yeah,
that
I
you
think
do
the
that.
blank slate was great when it was
Yeah,
psychoanalysis, but we don't have time. No one has the time for
yeah,
that now. And the dolphin approach, the motivational approach, is guiding, not directing, being
hmm,
shoulder to shoulder, moving forward together.
hmm,
Right. So, our health is moving where I want to be moving forward with my patients, shoulder to shoulder. I want them to be invested in our relationship. And fundamentally, that's the most powerful thing that unlocks resistance. I've worked with teenagers, angry, unhappy teenagers, for 23 years as a psychiatrist. And these tools, there's something called the keys, which I'll pass on, for the show notes. Or it's a 4-part communication tool based on empathy, autonomy, and optimism. Try
hmm.
it. You're going to have to try it a couple times, but it is our best way of making those connections.
Do share those. I'd love to put those in for sure. And I think you talked about those in the book as well. If I know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
actually, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's K means kill the shark or tiger or jellyfish. Regulate, right? Don't be in flight mode where you're checked out, or freeze mode where you're being overly directive or angry or aggressive.
Hmm.
Be that centered dolphin. So do your own grounding. And
Hmm.
then E is make a statement of empathy. Like, I know how much you love your phone. I
Hmm.
can see, how video gaming brings you so much joy and happiness, or your social media following, or what have you. Because we have to understand, for many people, this is income. This is or like that's leading to, it's important to be online. It was never necessary to drink alcohol. Like, maybe a little bit in the business world, we would hear that, and it was a factor.
Right.
But now we have to have empathy when we're talking about tech. And then your goal is to move more. Your goal is to sleep better, right? Passing and then ending with success. Like, I know you can do it. I struggled with this issue. This is what I did. Or I know this person's storytelling. And when you bring it together, we can help unlock that resistance.
Do you have patients that I'm sure you have where you get them over this hump? They have this severe overuse addiction that's impacting their life, and you work with them for 3 to 6 months and really make dramatic changes. Do you just see true happiness from like real dopamine and all that kind of stuff? I mean, that's got to be a good feeling when you see those things come out the other end.
Yeah, it is. And, if you've ever worked closely with someone who's overcome an addiction,
Mhm.
instability, you'll see what I call a replacement of pleasure, which is dopamine. Pleasure is sugar, pleasure is the addiction, versus happiness. And happiness is the endorphin, the self care, the sleep, the exercise. The oxytocin, the community, the connection, and then what I call serotonin, that's the creativity and learning.
Mhm.
So I have something called the life diet metaphor, which is, you want to replace the sugar, the pleasure for happiness. To replace that dopamine with endorphin, oxytocin, serotonin. Those are those three key daily activities. And then the metaphor I use for that is the pod. So play, others, downtime. These three things, part of the dolphin, is how we get to them. However, I would say it's not a light switch, right? This is a constant calibration. These are daily choices.
Mhm.
Anyone is prone to relapse. Any of us is prone to moving this way. So, it is wonderful, but it's part of our longevity, right? We're always going to have to calibrate to our environment.
Yeah. Well, I know we're getting close to your time. I appreciate your time. Is there any other important points you you know that you'd like to make? Moving forward with the population and what we're dealing with now with all this stuff. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I started the book with the fire of our time. We got to
Yeah.
get this right, or we'll burn ourselves and burn the village. And I think, we're seeing a little bit of that with polarization and people,
Hmm.
not being able, and it's all seems very scary. But I ended the book with this idea that we will evolve. We're meant to kind of, and survival of the fittest is not the fastest or the strongest, but the most adaptable.
Hmm.
And we will one day be what I called Homo technicus, people who have a good relationship with tech and using
Hmm.
it for like these podcasts and spreading information. And we've never had such ability to connect and find information. And it's really good news for
Hmm.
people who were left out, let's say the neurodiverse community, where, they couldn't learn, in that one dimensional way. And now there's so much multimedia. So I think, just really understanding the power of tech. And just to close on my own story, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I had years of chronic pain. And then this summer, I had a battery implanted in my hip and 5 titanium electrodes, and I modulate my pain with a remote control, and it's all programmed in AI, and it's all tech.
Yeah.
But it profoundly changed my life. It helped me get off medication. It reduced my pain. But before that, I had to leave my work as a psychiatrist, partly because I couldn't sit for such long periods of time. And tech is what allowed me to write my books, voice dictation and do my webinars. And
Yeah.
so I really feel that we want to embrace it. We want to be smart about it.
Yeah.
But it is very hopeful. And I think humans will figure it out.
Yeah. Any new books coming out the pipeline anytime soon?
I am working on a life diet book, which is like a cookbook, actually. 5 ingredients of life: cortisol, dopamine, endorphin, serotonin, oxytocin. And so it's going to look like a cookbook, but it's going to be ingredients for a healthy, happy life. And I think if we knew the 5 ingredients for life, just like we are now understanding, healthy fats, carbs, sugars, like, knowledge is power. We
Hmm.
can make better choices with all diets, right? All
Yeah.
consumption.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking some time out. And yeah, we'll have to catch up again in the future and talk more. So,
Great. Yeah. Thank you. And thanks for all your great work.
all right. Bye bye.